Battleground New York City, the fight for your vote. Your front row seat to the battle for New York's next mayor. It's the old guard clinging to power, chasing a candidate they never saw coming. Every night, our experts break it down.
What New Yorkers want above all else is authenticity.
We're listening to the people who matter most, you, the voters. And when the candidates sit across from us, nothing's off the table. What's your plan to make New York City feel like a safer city?
S.E Cupp, that's your perception. Of course, there's a lot of crime.
So what's happening right now? Let's dive in. Welcome to Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. It's Monday, October 27th. We're just 8 days away, y'all. Just a week and a day from this all-important New York City mayoral race. And later in today's show, we're going to talk to an expert, a Democratic strategist, about where this race is with just 8 days left. But first, as always, let's get to some news. And joining me now is Morgan McKay, political reporter for Fox 5 New York. Morgan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. So usually on a Monday, Morgan, I ask you where the candidates were over the weekend, and I will do that. But first, I want to talk about where the voters were over the weekend. They were early voting. We know there was a record turnout, but what else do we know about the folks who turned out to early vote over the weekend?
You're exactly right. There was more than 164,000 people who voted early on Saturday and Sunday. We love when people vote early and when they vote all together. So it was a really great turnout. The City Board of Elections says that they're going to have a special Halloween sticker. So if you're looking to vote on Halloween, on Friday, you're going to get a fun, different voting early sticker than if you were to go any other day, just putting it out there. But this voter turnout this weekend was 5 times higher than it was in 2021 during the last mayoral election. So really record turnout that we're seeing this weekend. And the Gothamist, the news agency Gothamist, did a voter analysis on some of the data that came in over the weekend. And they found that voters ages 55 and up were made up more than 50% of that early voting turnout. And according to experts, that really bodes well for Andrew Cuomo, who definitely has been polling a little bit higher, if not about even with Zohran Mamdani, with these older voters. So Cuomo's campaign definitely feeling a little bit more energized today, seeing those numbers. But we're really seeing a lot of those numbers coming from Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn. Those are also areas where Mamdani did really well during the primaries. So we'll have to see.
So interesting. And the candidates are really pursuing undecided voters in these final days, right? That's who they're hoping to turn out.
They definitely want to target those undecided voters, especially at this stage in the game. It's definitely going to be pretty few in number. I feel like a lot of people have really been paying attention to this election. It's hard to miss everything going on. This race has gotten national attention. So I think people are just really energized as well. This is like the first time that we've seen a race really get people this excited.
Okay, and let's talk about the candidates. There was a huge star-studded rally in Queens last night for Zohran Mamdani. Who all was there?
So Congresswoman AOC, Senator Bernie Sanders, Governor Kathy Hochul, Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins. They were all there on stage. Governor Kathy Hochul got not really booed, but sort of heckled a little bit while she was on stage. There was chants of calling for a tax a rich, which she's been really pushing against. But Mamdani came out at one point and held up her hand to sort of show unity in that moment, saying, it's okay, we're together, and then got her off stage and was able to get her off stage to some claps instead of sort of the chanting that was going on at that moment. But the crowd, there was about 10 to 13,000 people at this rally, and it drew people from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, ages, and there was a lot of energy that night, and I think you're seeing that a lot of that energy in his campaign, and a lot of people just really excited about who he is, and there's just been a huge canvassing effort as well over the weekend, trying to get people out to vote for him.
Right. And Andrew Cuomo was also at a rally in Queens on Sunday. What was his message and what was that like?
He had a rally as well, and it drew a few hundred people. It doesn't have quite the same energy that it does at Mamdani's, but that's not really the message that he's running on. He's definitely running on a campaign message that says Mamdani could destroy the city. President Donald Trump, if he wins, could come in and send in the National Guard, take over the city. So it's a little bit more of a fear campaign that he's been leading, saying things could get destroyed under Mamdani, whereas I could keep it the same, and you guys could rely on my leadership. So I think that you see that in his rally. A lot of the people that I was talking to that were there said more about Mamdani and not wanting him as mayor than they did about Cuomo and his campaign. But they also just really are looking for, again, that leadership experience that they say he brings, and also just this unity when it comes to anti-Semitism.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, when you compare like a couple hundred people went to his rally versus 10 to 13,000 went to Zohran Mamdani's, the conventional wisdom would be, how could he compete with Zohran Mamdani? But if it's a fear message and not a vibes message, right? A vibes message turns out all the people to the rally. A fear message doesn't mean you necessarily want to go to a rally for the guy, but you might still turn out. So it's hard to read the tea leaves through these last rallies as to where, voters are going to turn out. Where was Curtis Sliwa over the weekend?
Yeah, so Curtis Sliwa was holding his own sort of get out the vote effort with campaign supporters, and he went and actually voted early this weekend. He went with a big group of supporters. They all walked down the street and went to the American History Museum of Natural History is what I'm trying to say there. And they all went, and he voted early, cast his vote. And he also has been really trying to mobilize voters. He really also held a rally of sorts in Queens, and is just his canvassers have been out. They're smaller in number than both Cuomo's and Mamdani's team, but they're definitely working to get out that vote as well this weekend.
Okay, Morgan, I've got more questions for you, so don't go anywhere. More Battleground NYC will return after the break. We're back with more Battleground NYC, joined again by Morgan McKay, political reporter for Fox 5 New York. Morgan, we have a new poll, and I love new polls. Let's get into it. According to a brand new Suffolk University poll of voters, Mamdani's lead over Cuomo has shrunk to 10 points. He now stands at 44%, with Cuomo at 34%. The same poll a month earlier had Mamdani 20 points up on Cuomo. That feels significant. Now, 10 points is still a big gap, but that feels like in the closing days, Andrew Cuomo is closing in. He's moving in the direction he'd want to anyway.
If you definitely look at this poll, it seems like Cuomo's message that this is a two-person race is working, at least according to this poll. It definitely shows that Sliwa has become less of a third option, and maybe to Cuomo's argument that it is just now a two-person race.
Yeah.
However, as you mentioned, still a ways away. I know that Cuomo's campaign has privately told some people reportedly that they had hoped there would be a little bit more time, if they had a few more weeks maybe to this election, that he would be able to close that gap a little bit more. However, there is still time, and I think this goes to show again that there is so much attention around this election, and it's all really going to come down to voter turnout.
Yeah, that wanting more time thing, that can be a double-edged sword. You get more time to make some mistakes. So I never really buy that theory of the case. Voters have been paying attention. They've, they came out for the primary. Now they're doing what they need to do in the general. Yeah. Some more bad news for Sliwa, though. You mentioned he's sort of down in that poll, which makes me think Cuomo managed to pick off some of his voters in these closing weeks. But former New York City Council member and GOP leader Joe Borelli is voting for Cuomo over the Republican candidate. If Sliwa can't get Republicans to turn out, I'm not sure what his theory of the case is anymore.
That definitely is a big blow for Sliwa. Joe Borelli had been hinting for a while that he was probably going to be voting for Cuomo, and he has said that he is somebody who has battled it out with Cuomo maybe more than most. But he says that he doesn't want Mamdani, and that's why he's going to be voting for Cuomo, which is what some Republicans and some Democrats have said as well, that they're going to sort of hold their nose and vote for Cuomo, less sort of two evils as they describe it.
Yeah.
However, and also to that point, Borelli, he is a huge leader on Staten Island and somebody that a lot of Republicans really look up to. So Sliwa, if he wants to win, he's really going to need Staten Island. So it's definitely a big loss. But at the same time, I think that there are some people, some Republican voters from experts that I've been speaking to who will never vote for Cuomo. So I think he's hoping that he just keeps those votes, especially as former Governor David Patterson is also looking to potentially endorse Cuomo as well.
Yeah, we had, Bill Maher over the weekend said he'll vote for Cuomo. I've heard some other sort of MAGA folks who live in New York City saying it's got to be Cuomo. We don't like Cuomo, but it's got to be Cuomo over Mamdani. We'll see how that shakes out. Before I let you go, we also got some campaign fundraising numbers over the weekend. How much cash do the candidates have to spend before Election Day?
So Mamdani has a good chunk on hand, and I forgot to look up these numbers before coming on here, but I do know that Mamdani has around, I believe, $4 million cash on hand. I'm not really sure. And I think Saliwa should be getting maybe another cash infusion from public matching funds. But really, this is like the end stretch. So they're going to have to be throwing everything they have at some of these campaign ads. And they're hoping that this is going to help them get through to the end.
Yeah, I'm sure we're all going to start seeing even more ads if that's possible. Morgan McKay, thanks so much, as always, for coming on. Your reporting's great. I hope to see you at least one more time before this thing is over. I know you're working hard. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, and when we come back, we're in the final stretch. It's almost go time. Will the end of this race result in the best outcome for New York City and beyond? We're going to talk to a Democratic strategist about where things are. Battleground NYC. We'll be right back. And we're back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. Joining me now for the bigger picture is Trip Yang, a Democratic strategist and founder and CEO of Trip Yang Strategies. Trip, good to see you.
Always great to be back here.
Yeah. So record early voting numbers. And, we know that speaks to voter enthusiasm. But without knowing who people voted for, what can we learn from the early voting numbers that we've seen?
Right. So with the early vote numbers from Saturday and Sunday, there's positive signs if you're both for both Mamdani as well as for Cuomo. On the Mamdani side, turnout in very progressive Park Slope was very high. On the Cuomo side, turnout in very wealthy Upper East Side, where Cuomo did well in the primary, was also very high. Yeah. And, turnout across other neighborhoods was somewhat more mixed. But we can safely say that voter turnout in the 2025 general election is going to far surpass the 2021 general election. You will probably have north of 1.5 million New Yorkers turning out this general election, which would make it one of the highest, one of the highest turnout general elections we've had in a very long time.
Yeah, and I think you heard me talking to Morgan about turnout and enthusiasm, and you look at these rallies, and it would be easy to think, oh, Mamdani's got this locked up. I see all the signs, and all the young people are talking about him, and he's at these giant rallies, turning out thousands of voters. But we don't know, as you mentioned, in places where Cuomo does well, there was high turnout too.
Yeah, what I would just say is that if we use a sports metaphor, is that Mamdani is probably up in a football game by, let's just say 10 points, right? A touchdown and a field goal. I know that never happens with the New York Jets, but bear with me. Mamdani's up by a sizable but not a huge lead right now. However, the winds are blowing behind Mamdani. Mamdani is really kicking in the right direction. The reason why I say that is because when you look at all the polling, including the most recent one that had Cuomo shrinking Mamdani's lead, is that Mamdani's voters are very excited to vote for Mamdani. They're huge. Yeah. You just had to see a video clip of last night's rally at Forest Hill Stadium. Never have I seen a local New York election get over 10,000 New Yorkers in a stadium.
Yeah.
That felt like a Barack Obama rally or a Bernie Sanders for president.
Totally.
Rally. That is unheard of, unseen at the local level. And conversely, Cuomo's voters, a lot of them are not enthusiastic about voting for Cuomo. A lot of them are actually energized about voting against Mamdani. At the end of the day,
that's right.
We have seen this time and again in the Democratic and Republican parties. It is always better to have your voters voting for you than voting against something.
Yeah. Let's talk about that poll because I think it's also important to point out that while Cuomo has certainly risen in the polls, he's shrunk that gap. Mamdani hasn't gone down in the polls. Mamdani is either stayed where he is or even gone up a point or two. So it's not as if Cuomo's winning voters at Mamdani's expense, which is important to point out. Do you think that that 10-point gain that Cuomo made from the last Suffolk poll in September to the most recent, would that give the Cuomo campaign some real hope that he could win this, or do you think that that's kind of a little too little, too late?
Yeah, I'll say this. There were probably 1 or 2 points in this general election where Cuomo could have made it much more viable against Mamdani. One is that he clearly needs Curtis Sliwa to drop out. Curtis Sliwa most memorably and recently said he'd rather be fatally tortured to death than drop out. So there's your answer. Cuomo, in the most recent poll, seems to have been picking up Republican supporters of Curtis Sliwa. For his numbers to go up, Sliwa's numbers have to go down. That's what it's looking like. But the fact that Sliwa remains on the ballot and Sliwa is actively, energetically campaigning, he seems like a happy GOP warrior out there on the
Yeah.
campaign trail. That really hurts Cuomo. If Sliwa had dropped out of the race earlier, and
Mhm.
maybe if Cuomo had landed more substantive attacks on Mamdani that actually drives up Mamdani's favorables, this might be a razor close race in the single digits. But that hasn't really
Yeah.
happened.
So I know that all the candidates are going after undecideds right now. And, some people don't believe in undecideds, Trip. I came across this a lot while covering the 2024 election for Battleground. People just didn't believe anyone could be undecided, this late in the game. And here we are, a week and a day left. Do you believe that there are undecideds out there? And what's the best way to get them with a
Yeah.
week and a day?
Yeah, I would say at this point in the race, it's unlikely there's a lot of undecideds left. The reason is this. Mamdani and Cuomo have been running for mayor since almost the beginning of this year. Well, in Mamdani's case, since October 2024. They have raised and spent with their campaign committees and outside groups tens of millions of dollars combined. New Yorkers know who Mamdani and they know who Cuomo are. That's relatively baked. What is more likely to happen is that both respective campaigns are looking at a turnout game. Mamdani's
Yeah.
case, young voters, first time voters, progressive voters, South Asian voters. In Cuomo's case, older voters, more pro Israel voters, wealthier voters on the Upper East Side, for example. It is
Mhm.
more likely a turnout game than a persuasion game because at this point, much of the cake has already been baked.
What do you make of these last minute endorsements for Cuomo? Just over the last week, he got that Republican leader Joe Borelli. He got a talk show host Bill Maher, a former mayor Eric Adams, New York City
Yeah.
newspaper, the New York Daily News, former governor David Patterson is planning to endorse him. Will all of this in the last couple of weeks matter for Cuomo?
It almost feels like it's a little too little, too late. There was a time where a lot of this could have helped Cuomo, but
Mm,
this probably was around September, shortly after Labor Day, and not after we've already had 2 or 3 days of early vote already. I will say this:
yeah,
some of those endorsements help Cuomo with the Republican lane. Someone like Eric Adams, whose approval ratings are minus 60, I'd rather be
yeah.
endorsed by COVID-19 than Eric Adams at this point. I don't know if that really helps. But look,
Mm,
I will say something like the Daily News, some Republican council members, former elected officials, it helps Cuomo consolidate that type of right of center as well as
yeah,
conservative lane. On the other hand, Mamdani is consolidating the Democratic Party, most recently with
yeah.
Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' endorsement. So it's really a question of, is the Democratic coalition bigger than the non-Democratic coalition? And when you look at that, the math is always going to be favored in New York City towards Democratic
For
coalition.
sure. Yeah. Okay, Trip, stay right there because I've got more questions for you on the other side of this break. Battleground NYC returns after this. Back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. One more time with the bigger picture is Trip Yang, a Democratic strategist and founder and CEO of Trip Yang Strategies. Trip, over in New Jersey, just across the Hudson River. I mean, if you're not familiar, New Yorkers see New Jersey across the river. That's real. The Democratic nominee for governor, Mikey Sherrill, has not endorsed, and she doesn't plan to, apparently. She's really kept her distance from Mamdani. Is that a sign that not all Democrats are interested in hitching their wagons to his star, even in a neighboring state whose race is happening at the same time?
Yeah, let's unpack this for a minute here. So, in New Jersey, the mayor's race in New York City doesn't really matter for a New Jersey
Hmm.
governor's race that is surprisingly competitive, although I expect Mikey Sherrill to come out ahead. In New York
Okay.
City, similarly, a New Jersey governor simply does not matter. So,
Yes.
in your state or your city, you just focus on the local politics of your state or your city. What you're getting at, SC, I believe,
Mhm.
is that national Democrats outside the local New York City political bubble, some of them still have a wariness with embracing Zoran Mamdani. And
Yes.
much of it may be the fact that he identifies as a democratic socialist. He came out of nowhere. He didn't do your traditional climbing the ladder of serving as a city council member, a state assembly member, a congress member for 20, 30 years before you run for a really big seat like a
Hmm.
governorship or a big city mayor. It's okay
But
that he came outside from that political
no,
orthodoxy.
I understand that, but I think what the point I'm making about New Jersey is, while yes, they don't really have anything to do with each other, except of course they do. We share sports teams, we share bridges. New York and New Jersey are interwoven, and always get a lot of sort of New Jersey commentary on New Yorkers and New Yorker commentary on New Jersey. And if she thought it would be to her advantage, she would for sure weigh in on this New York City mayoral race. We had Chris Van Hollen, Maryland, weighing in. She could. The point is, she's choosing not to.
Well, sometimes campaigns don't know how to interact with a phenomenon in New
Yeah.
York City. And so
Yeah.
in politics, and this is not an insult at all, sometimes the more comfortable decision is to be more risk averse and just to
Yeah.
focus on what's directly affecting your race. So I see your point. Look, I spent a lot of time growing up in both New Jersey and New York City, have done dozens of campaigns across the metropolitan area.
Yeah.
There's some similarities, there's some local cultural differences between Jersey and New York. But I'll
Yeah.
say this, if Mamdani becomes mayor, the question or not if Democrats in 2026 and beyond will embrace him or give him the cold shoulder depends if he can really govern really well. If he can
Sure.
deliver for New Yorkers, have some of his agenda enacted quickly, universal child care, fast and free buses, for example, you will likely see more national Democrats outside of New York
Oh, I
embrace.
have no doubt. Yeah. I have no doubt. I mean, because there's no risk in embracing a guy who's doing well, right? The risk is now ahead of time when you don't know what he's going to do or if he can make good on his promises. What do you make of the main Senate race? There are some parallels. Graham Plattner is an outside progressive taking on an older establishment Democrat in Janet Mills. But he's unlike Mamdani. He's run into some trouble. What do you make of that race?
Yeah, I don't view this as similar to, and I've done campaigns in Maine. I don't view this as
Yep.
that similar to New York City at all. What's
Okay.
similar is that both Graham Plattner and Zoran Mamdani have been endorsed by Bernie Sanders in their Democratic primary. They have more of that leftist, outside
Yeah.
the establishment appeal, but they're
Mhm.
fundamentally two very different types of candidates. Graham Plattner has, look, quite frankly, a real history that he has to be accountable and clarify. Mamdani has been brought through the ringer, and Mamdani's actually pretty clean, right? Mamdani has said some comments about policing that he has apologized and walked back, but relatively speaking, Mamdani's as clean as you can get for an elected. Planner is not the case at all, and also on the more establishment side, if you will, Janet Mills is relatively decently liked by Maine
Yeah.
residents. Andrew
Yeah.
Cuomo has enormous baggage, had to resign from office 4 years ago. It is a different kind of race. Now, I will say this
Mhm.
finally, you will likely see some more quote unquote institutional embraced by the Democratic leadership candidates versus an outsider, progressive in 2026. That is quite frankly, as you know very well, that is
Mhm.
how the Democratic Party has been ever since Bernie ran for president in
Yeah.
2016. It is
Yeah.
just modern Democratic politics. And I'll say this finally, I do think it is healthy for the Democratic Party to have this internal debate.
We'll see. I think the verdict's out yet. not, not, it's not in yet. We'll see how well they're positioning themselves for the midterms. Trip Yang, thanks so much for coming on. As always, we appreciate you, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow and Monday through Friday until this election's over.